They'll smile. They'll charm. They'll say the right things, nod at the right moments, maybe even cry with you. But something never feels quite right. It's subtle, almost invisible, like a thread out of place, a tension behind the eyes, a voice that sounds hollow under the warmth. And if you're not paying attention, you'll ignore it. You'll call it anxiety. You'll convince yourself it's just you. But Carl Jung would have told you the truth. There is one type of person you must never fully trust, no matter how kind, how charismatic, or how broken they seem. Because this person isn't showing you who they are. They're showing you a mask that was built, not to deceive you, but to survive you. And if you fall for it, they will pull you into their story, use your empathy as fuel, and slowly, very slowly, steal your identity without ever touching you. So who is this person? They're not loud. They're not obviously cruel. They may not even realize what they're doing. But Jung knew exactly how to describe them. The person who cannot see their own shadow will unconsciously project it onto others. That's them. The person who refuses to confront their darkness. The one who cannot admit they've ever done harm. Who hides behind victimhood. Who constantly changes their story to protect their ego, even if it means destroying your peace. They are the unhealed, the unintegrated, the fragmented soul who desperately clings to a false self. And when you get close to them, they don't connect with you. They consume you. They are, by all appearances, normal. That's the trap. You're not looking at a monster. You're looking at someone who believes their own lies. Someone who has spent years, sometimes decades, crafting a version of themselves so polished, so emotionally believable, that even they forget it's not real. But underneath that surface is chaos, unprocessed rage, buried shame, envy they can't name, but you will feel it the moment you start to shine. And instead of confronting their inner world, they export it onto you. You become the selfish one, the unreliable one, the villain in their carefully curated story. And the worst part, they don't even know they're doing it. Jung's warning. Beware the person who cannot criticize themselves, because the moment you try to hold them accountable, they implode, or explode, or disappear completely. They'll twist the narrative, paint themselves as the victim, make you question your memory, your intentions, your goodness. And that's when you realize they don't love you. They love what you make them feel about themselves. And when that feeling fades, they'll discard you like you were the problem all along. These are not ordinary liars. They are emotional shapeshifters. And Jung's warning wasn't casual. He called this phenomenon psychic possession, when the unconscious shadow takes full control of the personality. And once someone is possessed by their own false image, they cannot see reality. And worse, they refuse to let you live in yours. You start to feel it before you understand it. A heaviness in the room when they enter. A tension in your chest after a conversation, a strange guilt for things you didn't do, or things that were never even wrong. That's not your overthinking. That's your psyche picking up the signal. This person is not showing up as themselves. They're showing up as a projection, and they're making you carry the burden of everything they won't admit lives inside them. Carl Jung called this the disowned shadow, and the people who refuse to see it become the people who quietly destroy the ones closest to them. This person doesn't insult you directly. They'll say things like, "I just think it's funny how," not to be dramatic, but "you always make it about you," or "you misunderstood me." Every phrase cloaked in ambiguity, every sentence a trap, because they're not trying to connect, they're trying to offload, to dump their inner pain onto you in a way that keeps them pure and you contaminated. And when you react, they'll say, "You're the one overreacting." This is projection, not conscious manipulation, unconscious survival. They're not trying to lie to you, they're trying to keep themselves from collapsing. But make no mistake, they will destroy your self-trust in the process. This is what makes them so convincing. They cry real tears. They tremble when they're hurt. They speak in emotional language that sounds like truth. But it's not clarity. It's emotional camouflage. These people haven't confronted the part of themselves that's vindictive, that envies, that manipulates, that lies. So when they feel those urges rise, they see them in you instead. They say you're the angry one, you're the selfish one, you're the fake. And the more you defend yourself, the more guilty you start to feel. Not because you did something wrong, but because you've been pulled into their narrative so deeply, you start losing track of your own. They don't need to shout. They just need to withdraw love when you speak your truth, act confused when you call out a contradiction. Use your vulnerabilities as proof you're unstable. Frame your strength as intimidation, and call your honesty attacks. Over time, you stop expressing. You stop feeling safe. You start doubting your perception and trusting theirs. And that's the ultimate danger. Because once you internalize their story about you, you begin to lose the very part of yourself that could have escaped them. That is how the unintegrated shadow works. It doesn't kill your body, it erodes your soul. The most dangerous person is the one who hasn't met themselves, because they are ruled by unconscious forces. And unconscious forces don't negotiate, they don't take responsibility, they don't apologize, they don't heal, they repeat, they perform, they punish. And they do it all while swearing they're the one being hurt. So when you meet someone who refuses to look inward, someone who cannot own their role in the patterns of their life, run. Not because they're evil, but because they are a black hole. And your empathy is the fuel they feed on. You'll try to help them. That's the worst part. You'll think your love can heal them. You'll think if you're gentle enough, patient enough, understanding enough, they'll finally see the damage they're doing. But they won't. Not because they're incapable, but because they've built their entire identity on avoiding that truth. Carl Jung said the person who refuses to confront their shadow will do anything to maintain their illusion of innocence, even if it means bleeding out the people closest to them. This isn't just a personality flaw, it's psychological warfare, and they don't even know they're fighting it. At first, you resist. You defend your intentions, you explain yourself, you point out the inconsistencies. But slowly, their energy starts shaping you. You find yourself apologizing when you didn't do anything wrong. You soften your tone not because you were harsh, but because they were sensitive. You stop sharing your ideas, your wins, your joy, because it always seems to upset them. And just like that, you become small, predictable, careful, tired. Not because they asked you to, but because your nervous system learned what they punish and what they reward. This is not love. It's psychological conditioning. And it's exactly what Jung meant when he warned about emotional possession. This is the hardest truth to accept. They were never in love with your soul. They were in love with what your soul made them feel about theirs. As long as you made them feel victorious, innocent, special, superior, or desired, you were safe. But the moment you showed pain, the moment you needed something back, the moment you held up a mirror instead of a spotlight, that's when the withdrawal began. Because now you are a threat. You are no longer a character in their story. You are now the person who might expose the story for what it is. And they will do everything to silence you. They won't yell. They'll say things like, "Why are you always so negative?" "I didn't say that, you're twisting my words." "I think you need to talk to someone." Or, "You're too sensitive, I was just joking." And every time you try to ground yourself in truth, they shift the floor beneath you. Until one day you realize, you're not confused because you're unstable. You're confused because they need you to be unstable so they don't have to face themselves. This is not by accident. This is how the unhealed shadow survives, by making anyone who sees it question their sanity. Because they don't wear masks that scream danger. They wear masks of warmth, woundedness, even wisdom. They talk like healers. They cry like victims. They reflect everything you want to believe about love and connection. But there's nothing beneath the mask, just a hollow refusal to do the one thing that would make them whole: turn inward. Until then, they live through others, drain others, shape others into containers for their denied self. And if you're not careful, you'll spend years becoming someone you don't recognize, just to keep their illusion intact. That is the slow death Jung tried to save us from. You think you're helping them by staying. You think your presence is a gift, a lifeline, a form of love they've never known before. But to someone who hasn't faced their shadow, your light is not healing, it's threatening, because it shines on the very parts of themselves they've spent their whole life avoiding. And when someone is deeply identified with their false self, the part that is always the victim, always right, always fragile, they will experience your truth as an attack. Carl Jung's warning was simple: do not trust the person who refuses to examine themselves, because their pain doesn't stay contained. It infects. Watch what happens when you ask about their past. They will tell stories where they were always betrayed, no one ever understood them, everyone else was toxic or abusive, and every friendship, every relationship, every job ended unfairly. And at first you empathize. You think, wow, they've been through so much. Maybe I'm the one who can finally treat them right. But eventually a chilling pattern emerges. It's never their fault. No accountability, no self-reflection, just a string of villains. And somehow they were always the hero. But Jung knew the truth. If someone never admits their role in any pain, they aren't safe, because they haven't met the part of themselves capable of harm. And the people who believe they're incapable of harm often cause the most. They don't do it aggressively. They do it subtly, over time. They question how you remember things. They laugh off your serious feelings. They say, "I never said that," when you bring up hurtful comments. They tell you what your intentions were, even when you explain them. Each moment by itself feels small, but the cumulative effect? You begin to doubt yourself. You hesitate before speaking. You replay conversations at night, wondering what's real. This is not a communication issue. This is spiritual erosion. And Carl Jung understood exactly how it happens. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. So they rewrite your soul instead, until the only story left standing is theirs. By the time you consider leaving, you're already exhausted. You've become the caretaker, the therapist, the buffer between them and their guilt, the person they expect to never break. But Jung would ask you, is this love or is this servitude? Because true connection includes mutual growth, mutual responsibility, mutual self-awareness. And what you're in is not mutual. It's one-sided at the soul level. And the longer you stay, the more your nervous system adapts to dysfunction. You start to mistake anxiety for love, silence for peace, manipulation for emotional depth. But deep down, you know, this isn't connection. This is containment. This is the moment everything changes. You say something too honest. You finally set a boundary. You show them a reflection they weren't ready to see. And they snap, not always violently, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually, they split. You go from being their savior to being their enemy. And they will do everything to preserve the mask. They will recast you as the abuser, rally others to validate their version of events, twist your truth into cruelty, and blame your boundaries as betrayal. This is not accidental. It's the psyche trying to defend itself from annihilation. Jung warned, the shadow defends itself like a wounded animal. And once you touch it, once you reveal that you see it, you become the greatest threat of all, the mirror they cannot shatter. At some point, you'll want to scream the truth. You'll want to grab them by the shoulders and say, "Don't you see what you're doing? Can't you see how much you're hurting people?" But they won't. Because to see it would be to shatter everything they believe keeps them safe. Carl Jung understood this at a level few others did. He knew the ego wasn't evil. It was fragile, built like armor over a soul that was never taught how to heal. So when you confront someone like this, it's not your truth they're rejecting. It's their collapse they're running from. And the only way to avoid collapse is to make you the villain. Once you see them clearly, and they sense it, they shift. They begin to rewrite the story. To everyone else, you were unstable, controlling, toxic, cold, or selfish. And they will cry as they say it. They'll be convincing. They'll make it sound like they tried everything, and that you just couldn't love them right. But Jung knew this tactic well. He called it psychic splitting. When someone cannot hold the contradiction inside themselves, the parts that are good and destructive, They externalize the bad. You are now holding the darkness they refuse to see, not because you deserve it, but because they refuse to carry their own shadow. When you walk away, it won't feel empowering at first. It'll feel like death, because they've made you question your own perception for so long, even escaping starts to feel like betrayal. You'll wonder, maybe it really was my fault. What if I was too hard on them? Or, what if they really did love me but didn't know how to show it? These aren't your thoughts. These are the psychological remnants of their projection. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." They never could, and so they made you carry the burden of their self-rejection in the form of self-doubt. But now you're waking up, and waking up means grieving not just the person, but the version of you who believed it was your job to save them. You realize the red flags were never loud. They were quiet. How you were always the one apologizing. How your joy slowly started to shrink. How your intuition was always whispering, "Something's off," but you kept pushing it down. Carl Jung didn't want us to become paranoid. He wanted us to become aware. Aware of the energy behind words. Aware of the shadow behind charm. Aware of when love feels more like obligation than freedom. And most of all, aware of who you become in someone's presence. Because that will always tell you the truth they're trying to hide. Can you walk away without needing to be understood? Because you won't get closure. They won't admit it. They won't thank you. They won't come back with clarity. They'll double down on the lie. Because the lie protects them. And you will be left with a choice. Chase justice and get pulled back into the story. Or choose peace and write your own. Jung would say, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You've made it conscious. Now don't let it turn back into fate. You don't need them to see the truth. You only need to stop betraying your own. At last, you're free. But freedom doesn't feel like triumph at first. It feels like silence. Like standing in a room once filled with noise, echoes, and chaos, now eerily quiet. No accusations. No confusion. No distorted reflections. Just you. And the weight of your own clarity. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the path back to your real self. Not the self shaped by projection. Not the self who performed to earn peace. But the self that always knew something was off and finally had the courage to walk away. You don't heal by being loved by the right person. You heal by stopping the betrayal of your soul. For so long you stayed because you believed love could fix it. That if you just understood them better, gave them more time, softened your edges, they'd eventually see what you saw. But Jung warned us, people will do anything to avoid facing their own soul. And that includes destroying those who hold up the mirror. It was never about whether you were good enough. It was about whether they were ready to meet themselves. They weren't, and you paid the price, until you stopped. Now you begin again, with discernment, not bitterness. You don't need to fear people, but you must never again ignore the signs. The person who plays the victim in every story, the one who's never wrong, the one who shifts blame like it's survival, the one who speaks of their wounds like they're weapons, and the one who leaves you questioning your sanity every time you speak truth. These are not safe souls, not because they are evil, but because they are unconscious. And unconsciousness is contagious. It spreads through guilt, projection, emotional confusion. It infects until you forget who you are and begin living inside their wound instead of healing your own. The person who cannot own their shadow will spend their life trying to find someone else to carry it. And if you're not awake, if you're kind but unguarded, empathetic but boundaryless, they'll choose you. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to absorb what they can't face. That's why this person is so dangerous. Not because of what they do out loud, but because of what they make you do to yourself over time. So what happens now? You stop chasing apologies. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop needing the truth to be mutual. Because truth isn't democratic. Truth just is. And yours says, you saw something they couldn't. You loved deeper than they were ready for. And you left not out of hate, but out of spiritual necessity. And now, you rise. Slowly, quietly, completely. You build a new kind of trust. Not in others. In yourself. The way your body tightens when someone is hiding something, The way your intuition nudges you mid-conversation, and the way your energy shifts after being near certain people. You no longer dismiss those signs. You honor them. Because now, you know. The one type of person you must never fully trust is the one who hasn't yet chosen to meet their own shadow. Because if they haven't made that choice, they will always try to make you carry it for them. And that is a weight you will never carry again.